All right. Thank you so much for that warm welcome. I'm incredibly excited to be here today. And on behalf of Kate Mitchell, Niloo Howe, and myself, incredibly excited to welcome you to the 6th annual Rise of the Female Entrepreneur at the Montgomery Summit. So a little bit of history on this event from my perspective. I first attended this event 3 years ago and sat somewhere over there in the 4th row. Last year, Jamie invited me to come up on stage and moderate a panel. Now in my 3rd year, he volunteered me to do the opening. So dream big, row 4. You could be sweating it out up here in the not too distant future. But let me start by thanking Jamie Montgomery, whose vision for this conference was really ahead of its time. He launched this event far before it was trendy or cool to support female entrepreneurs and investors. And it's an amazing opportunity for all of us as women in this industry to have a platform at one of the most preeminent technology and investor conferences in the industry. So Jamie, thank you so much for your continued support. We wouldn't be here without you. So let's level set. Where are we at as women in this industry today? From a fundraising perspective, 2018 was actually a pretty good year. $2.9 billion in funding went to female-founded and led companies, which was up 38% year over year. From an investor perspective, 10 years ago, if you looked at the top 10 funds, you saw that only 2 of them actually had female partners. And there were a total of 3 female partners at these top 10 funds. Today, we've made incredible progress on that statistic. All 10 of those funds has at least 1 woman partner for a total of 15 female partners across those 10 funds. So that's some pretty great progress. But we also know we're not quite at parity yet. There's still room for us to make improvements, but that's why we're here today, because the only way that we can do this is together. I'd especially like to thank the men that joined us today. We have obviously some incredible women in this room that you'll have the chance to meet and that we're showcasing on stage today. But your participation in this movement is incredibly important, and we're so glad that you've joined us as well. Yeah, we can clap for them. We have an incredibly exciting lineup of female entrepreneurs that are joining us today. And I think one of the consistent themes that you will see across all of them is that they have incredibly big visions of the world. And that's one of the themes we really hope that you walk away from this event with today. As women going out there to build your own businesses, don't be afraid to think big. It's those game-changing ideas that become the next billion-dollar companies. And we know that some of you are going to be founders of unicorns in the not-too-distant future, but you need to dream big. And in order to dream big, you need to believe in yourself. You've got to show up, you've got to work hard, but at the end of the day, despite however many people out there tell you you can't do it, you need to believe in the vision that you're putting out into the world. And so with that, and hopefully some inspirational words to kick things off, really excited to welcome you all here today, and let's get things started with our first panel. Thank you so much.
My mic is on. We have an incredible panel here, and we don't have enough time to get into it with everyone. So I'm going to skip introductions for the most part, except I'm going to ask Deb, Liz, and Sarah to quickly do a introduction elevator pitch about your companies, just so we can set the context for this conversation. Deb, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. So Deb Kilpatrick, I'm the CEO of Evidation Health. We're a software company headquartered in San Mateo with an office in Santa Barbara as well. And we're a new way of measuring health in everyday life. And what that means is we connect directly to people in their daily lives across conditions and therapeutic areas in healthcare that have high relevance to the top global pharma companies and top global medtech companies in the world. And we allow them to measure outcomes and health very, very differently, completely outside of clinic walls, with data streams that are permissioned directly from the individual and flowing through us in our daily lives.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Liz Maida, founder and CEO of Uplevel. We're a New York City-based cybersecurity company applying graph theory and machine learning to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of security operations teams. So right now, security operations teams are receiving thousands and thousands of alerts each week, and every single one of those is investigated in isolation. So not only is that an incredibly inefficient use of resources, it also means that really critical events are completely overlooked. So our software automatically correlates and prioritizes these events, and ultimately can improve the effectiveness of security teams by over 80%.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Nahm, and I'm a co-founder and CEO at Lever. And Lever is advancing recruiting software and really helping organizations address 21st century challenges around talent. As you guys know, human capital really is the only capital. Now that we're in the information age, now that growth and innovation are actually really driven by people's ability to navigate like a really rapidly changing world, it's all the more important for organizations to elevate the way they think about talent. And I think in particular, what we're doing is we're helping, a traditionally administrative you might say traditional category, think a lot more strategically. So we are really equipping the next generation of talent leaders to have the reach of a marketing leader, the forecasts of a sales leader, and the insights of a finance leader, and really delivering kind of the next generation of recruiting software in one connected talent cloud. So our customers range from high-tech customers like Netflix to, retail like J.Crew to whatever category Cirque du Soleil might be. We're helping really drive a lot of amazing talent. And I think our mission as a company is to really connect human potential to meaningful work. And that's why I love what I do.
So one of the things I love about this panel is you have three female CEOs who are solving some pretty hardcore problems that have real implications from a social perspective. Deb, I want to start with you. You're literally a rocket scientist. No joke. And I'm not going to get into people's backgrounds, but you guys should look it up. You've done some incredible things at big companies, and you could be running a Fortune 100 company. You decided to start your own, do a startup. Talk about that. What was that decision? Why did you decide to jump into it?
So my dad is a high school football coach, or he spent his career being a high school football coach in a rural community where I grew up in Georgia. And so I watched him sort of make a career out of integrating the school systems and the teams in the Deep South in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s until he retired. And what I learned from that is that this ability to bring people together from very, very different backgrounds and experiences is the way to win. That's how you win. And so for me, I sort of just really learned from that, and I feel like I can do that on a scale of 100 more than I can do that at a scale of 100,000. And so, I like to believe that I'm involved in every employee's life at Evidation, right? Even if they're not working in the office with me every day. And I like to promise them when they come there that they're going to be better and far exceeding the potential they think they have when they leave for whatever reason than when they walked in the door. And I just feel like I can do that on a level of a startup better than I can a level of a Fortune 50 company. And that's what became important to me the older that I got.
And you're a CEO and you've led big teams at big companies. What's the big difference between the two as you do that?
The day-to-day impact that you feel that you can have on a given individual. It's just every individual in a startup or in a small company has a disproportionate impact on the culture, has a disproportionate impact on the workflow, has a disproportionate impact on the outcome and the growth. And I like being close to that. I like affecting that. And so it's just a scale question. Yeah.
And Liz, you're in cybersecurity, where I think our workforce is about 10% women. But there's 3,000 companies. There's about $6 billion a year being spent. There is no lack of companies out there. We've got huge incumbent companies that have been around for 30 years. We've got new companies popping up every day. You were at Akamai solving some pretty incredible problems. And you decided to leave and start a company in this crowded space where it's hard to rise above the noise, and you have. So talk about that jump.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of my background, I worked at Akamai for many years, and I actually started at Akamai in the very early days of the company. So definitely not the exact same thing as being the founder at an early stage startup, but I got to experience part of what Dan had mentioned of everybody is so invested in what you're building, and you care so much, and like you are working all the time, not because you have to or anything, it's because you actually are personally invested in what you are doing, and I loved that. From the beginning of my time at Akamai, what I really wanted to do was be part of the founding R&D team that started a company, because Akamai's background was coming out of MIT. The technical aspect was incredibly important in this idea of technical innovation as applied to a business problem. And so, I mean, it took me a long time actually to leave Akamai. I mean, you can ask my husband how many years I was talking about, oh, I really want to go do this, I really want to go do this. And he's like, just do it. You know, you care so much, you have some great ideas. Even if these are not the ideas that end up being right, you will figure something out and you will learn so much along the way. So in terms of security, I mean, Nilo's absolutely right. There are thousands and thousands of companies, and I think quite honestly, a good number of them are building, their businesses based on marketing and not necessarily the technology. I mean, it is challenging to rise above the noise, especially when you don't necessarily have the same level of resources. And so what I've found in my personal experience is you just have to really, really focus on what are you building, why do the customers care, how can you really establish and continue to prove your value and credibility, on the ground and working directly with the customers.
Now, Sarah, you are, first of all, I just want to point out that Sarah jumped in here. We had another amazing CEO on the panel who's having a baby. So that happens sometimes when we have a panel of female CEOs. And reached out to Sarah, and she absolutely jumped in and said yes. So thank you so much for helping out here. You are at slightly later stage, and I'd love for you to touch on the issues of scaling a company through its various stages of growth. And also, you've had some interesting experiences with co-founders along the way. So if you can touch on that, that would be awesome.
Oh my gosh, yeah, every chapter is so different. I think there's a cliche, and it's a cliche because it's true, that your job changes every 6 months. And the reason your job changes every 6 months is because your company changes every 6 months. And I think there are these distinct chapters, and one of the toughest and most gratifying things about being a CEO of a fast-growing technology company is you really master this meta skill that is learning, evolving, and finding kind of your own way, as I'm sure you guys have had, through so many different versions of leadership and versions of culture in the team. And I think at the highest level, I think the one thing that's so consistent is you have to develop this ability to be a complete novice at your job and rapidly refigure out what your purpose, what your calling, what your impact is. Get good enough at it that then, ding, you realize, oh, it's time to essentially find somebody to take this version of this job over and then go figure out what the next chapter of your job is. It's sort of like surfing change. And I think, where that intersects with co-founders is it's not just you personally, but it's the changing dynamic of all the people around you. And I think a primary responsibility of a CEO is very much to build the right team around you. And whether that's co-founders, early employees, executives, many chapters of executives and leadership at your company, I mean, that's the one constant, is you're always figuring out this puzzle that is what are the people that you're building around you? What's the tribe you're building around you? And how are you always kind of evolving that, making sure you're bringing in the right skills, the right perspectives, making sure it's a diverse set of perspectives. All of that comes into play.
So let's dive into this question of culture. And I want to open it up to anyone on the panel who wants to answer it. What is culture, and how do you build it? Who wants to take
And we only have 20 minutes.
Yeah, in 3 minutes or less. Who wants to take that on?
I mean, I'll take a shot at sort of telling you what I think it is or how it shows up. I think that, first of all, everybody's definition is going to be different, right? Including your own employees, and you have to remember that. So as much as I may want to define the culture, the irony is that I can have a disproportionate impact on the culture if I behave badly, right? or the opposite. But the reality is everybody's at the company for a slightly different reason. We may all believe in the mission. We may all believe in what we're doing to better the sector of the society that we're in. But everybody's there on a day-to-day basis for a different reason. To me, that defines the culture, that collection of reasons that people show up to participate, and that intention that people bring with them every day into the office, or into what I call the two-dimensional office of Google Hangouts. That intention is what defines culture. And everybody's intention, it's okay for it to be a little bit different. I think that where culture can go south very, very quickly is when the people at the top take their eye off the ball and think that their presence doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think I tend to really agree. I think, culture isn't the writing that you have on the wall or sort of the things that you say about yourselves. I think culture really manifests in the choices that are made, and that can be, in the kind of most critical, kind of dangerous times, like the key decisions you make. And then I think it's also in the everyday. It's in the hiring decisions you make. It's in the decisions to promote or to recognize, or honestly, it's in the decisions you make when you walk away or when you have to make tough decisions, like, firing somebody. That's a major kind of expression of culture. So I tend to kind of say, like, culture is very behavioral. And I can trace back every one of Lever's 5 values to a critical decision that we had to make at one point, and how you make those really tough decisions. I think that's really where what a company culture is truly shows.
What are the 5 values?
Oh, what are Lever's 5 values? They may not make sense, but I can tell you. One is raise the bar. I think it ties back to our ambition, and why we entered the HR space. We really wanted to actually elevate that entire industry. We felt our users, our customers deserve that. Second is champion cross-functional empathy. For us, we really don't think of ourselves as a product-led company, a sales-led company. It takes every part of the business. That's why they're there, for us to succeed. Know why. We're very much a company where that's what fuels fast and effective decision-making, is really empowering people to go and know why. Don't trust comfortable, which I think is just this constant. You've got to always be in that growth mindset. And then our last one is choose reality. And I think the opposite of choose reality, the choose fantasy, that's when you're sort of like, we're predestined to succeed, we're going to be amazing, we're disrupting all this stuff. I think at Lever, at least, we tend to be really inspired by the real world. And we like to and reward and recognize people that actually can find kind of that engagement with the real world and see opportunity in it.
So to pull on that thread for a second, this gets back to the question of culture as well. I don't know how many people here read the book Bad Blood that came out. Yeah. So one of these questions, not just about the lies you tell yourself to keep going, but how do you balance an aura of confidence to your employees, to your investors, to the outside world, with honesty, transparency, and accountability as you tackle 1,000 dragons a day?
Yeah. I would say it is a real and constant challenge, because I think in a lot of ways, part of the role of the founder, the CEO, kind of whoever is kind of in those leadership positions, is to some extent helping to absorb some degree of the uncertainty that's out there, because you don't want the entire team and the entire company worried about every possible thing that might be going wrong. Like, your job is to make sure that they can do their best possible job. But you can't do that to the extent that they're operating in a complete vacuum. And so it is this question of how transparent are you, and at what critical points? And I think in some ways it almost goes back to the beginning of who you're hiring, and having some actually really tough conversations at the beginning of the recruiting process. So I will say, in the early days, when I had no product, no team, no money, I had literally nothing to offer people to come work with me. That was not my attitude. I was like, if you are willing to do any part of this job, like, that is fantastic. Just like, please come, and like, I'll pay you whatever. Like, let's just do this. I think one of the critical things that I learned, and what I shifted soon after that, is actually it's far more important in those initial conversations. You have this discussion of like, you know what, listen, we're going to go through some terrible times. I don't know what they are yet, but like they will exist. And you have to love that. Like you have to want that to be part of the experience. You have to want to feel those days where it's the lowest of the low and everything's a disaster and you're like, all right, well, let me pick myself up and keep going. And maybe it's not to the exact same extent as the CEO or the founder, whoever plays that role, but you need those people to want to go through those awful circumstances with you.
Yeah, I often tell people, when you're in rough patches, which sometimes feels like every day, that's first, let's break the myth that it's not fun every day to scale a startup or a growth stage. Like, it's not. It's really hard work. And I think that, it's important to remind people that, this is why you're here.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, everybody wants to grow,
yeah,
right?
When you came here, that there would be hard times. You came here for the mission. You may have come here for other reasons. You like the leadership. You like the whatever. But you knew it was going to be hard, and you chose to do it anyway. Well, welcome to the hard part. Like, this is how we get better as a company. This is how we get better as individuals. If it were easy, monkeys would run the company, right? I mean, it's not easy. And so, on a personal level, for me, that honesty takes the form of, I think there's two incredibly important things that I have to be able to say at any all-hands meeting, in any one-on-one, in any forum related to the company, including board meetings, which is, I need help and I was wrong. And if you can actually get to a place where you are very comfortable as a leader saying that, and confidently, honestly saying that in any forum, you're there. You've got the right balance of honesty, transparency, and confidence. That's my view of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's kind of well known that a lot of women in entrepreneurship roles and leadership roles in tech, they're plagued with the imposter syndrome. And I feel like there was one big insight that I had that really kind of like switched me over to being way more focused, way more, positive about myself, which was like, as kind of you go through, getting more and more leadership, having more and more impact, the things that make it to your plate tend to become more and more intractable, more risky, less likely to succeed, generally share all the markers of failure. Because if they were easy, they wouldn't reach you. They would get picked up and run with by other people in the company, other layers in the company. So in a way, the kind of more senior you become, and certainly if you're, scrappy startup founder, CEO, like the only things you really get are the shit problems. Like that's it. That's like your entire day. It's not this healthy balance of 50-50. Because if you're lucky, the team that you built around you is running with all the stuff that is going great. And you have to start realizing, here I'm beating myself up because everything I'm working on is slow and it's stuck and it's got all these attributes that look like failure. But actually that's an affirmation that you're working on the right things, that you're focused at the right level, that you are deploying yourself in the most impactful way that you can. Yeah. And I think as soon as I had that perspective shift, I started seeing all the crap projects I was working on. I was like, this is a great sign that I'm actually working on, providing the biggest value that I can.
And I would say to go along with that, it's like this whole idea of being comfortable with being uncomfortable and being okay 100%. With failure, right? It's like you just have to assume, it's like, you know what? You failed. That's fine. That's not a mark of anything. What matters is how quickly you realize it, how quickly you adjust to it. And I think that's oftentimes very hard, is like that willingness to embrace failure. Like in some ways, the best way to do it is just like fail really frequently, very quickly, and then it doesn't affect you anymore because you're like, I've done way worse before.
I think another thing it's important to sometimes remind like the leadership team, the broader employees as well, like when things are going really, really well, that's why they pay us salaries. When things are going really hard, that's why we have equity. Mm-hmm.
That's great. There's a great Churchill quote, right? Success is not final, failure is not fatal, it's the courage to continue that counts. And that happens almost every day in the startup environment. So as you go through these, do you guys have coaches? Who do you turn to for advice? Because sometimes you have the team, but there's some problems that, you need to talk through with someone. So where do you go? And what role does the board play? What role do investors play in all of this?
I mean, my independent board member is in many ways my best and most trusted counsel for certain things, right? Because they are the one that is supposed to look through the lens of all the shareholders. And I find that counsel, and this is someone who's known me personally and professionally for a number of years. So she's seen me in good times, she's seen me in bad times, and she will tell it to me like it is. If I'm actually doing the wrong thing, she will tell me immediately, and I value that. On a personal level, I've really sort of curated peer-to-peer mentors over many years who I'm both friends with and colleagues with in different jobs, different companies. Who I want people to tell me the truth. I don't need people to tell me what I'm capable of. I can look at my LinkedIn profile if I need to know that. I need people to remind me of what no one else is going to say to me in that moment, and it's going to crystallize whatever it is that's really going on and how I'm holding myself back from solving it. That's who I want. And that tends to be people that have known me for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, one of the constant people who's kind of provided that support for me, I worked for many years at Akamai. And while he's been kind of ancillarily involved in the company as an advisor, he's not involved on a day-to-day basis or anything of that sort. But yet he knows me, and I trust his judgment. And I think it is that, that candor, that brutal honesty is how he terms it, right? And it is. There's this book, Radical Candor, that is about like how you deliver this really hard feedback, but in a way that if the other person knows it's because you care, it's interpreted very differently. And I would say having at least one person, ideally more, who can give you that feedback, who can tell you when you're being crazy or just plain wrong or stubborn or doing the absolutely wrong thing, but can say it in just a very forthright manner. It's like, oh, well, this is obviously what your issue is. I mean, that's invaluable.
Yeah, I think at a certain point, like you're in the trenches so much with your team, with your company, with your product, like perspective and having new perspective is actually of fundamental value to your company. And you're a conduit for that. So there's like this mode that you can have where like, oh, I feel like any second I'm not spending on the business is not worth it or is selfish. And whether it's through mentorship, coaching, community, I think actually I've found that you get so much perspective that you just can't have if you're within the four walls of your company, that you are responsible for bringing that in. So I think as Lever's grown bigger and bigger, it's become more and more important to put myself in other communities, and I'm not really even that discriminatory. It's sort of like any community that's out there. I think there is value. Of late, I've been really lucky to find a lot more, I think, women entrepreneur groups actually, and that's been really rewarding and new for me. And so, I would say at the end of it, believing in the people that believe in you can lead you to a lot of really powerful places. And I think at the end of the day, you are really serving your business and your strategy by investing in yourself.
So we only have about a minute left, and I love listening to this conversation. I think we've gone for a long time. What piece of advice do you wish someone had given you before you started your company?
You do not have to win everything. Every debate, every decision, every negotiation, every whatever, right? You just don't. There are some times in life where you must keep up, and that is the best way to conserve your energy for the things that you must win.
Damn.
The hardest part is the people, by far. I mean, I think you can have managed hundreds or thousands or however many people in other jobs. It is completely different when you're within the context of a startup, especially when in many ways you're the one who has convinced them to come work on this. The weight that you are carrying as a result of that, and the difference in terms of what you're thinking about versus all of these employees who in many ways it's your responsibility to help grow and provide guidance, it creates so many challenges that are in many ways almost impossible to fully explain until you've gone through it. And I think if I had known that, and if people had stressed the importance of having a community of other fellow founder CEOs from the beginning, it would help a lot, because you realize you're not the only one. These problems are almost always universal.
Oh gosh, I feel like You know, the thing that I would say to everybody is just the biggest barriers really are just in your own head. And I think reframe how you think about yourself and do that regularly and build a muscle around that. Because that's actually, I think, the key to true success. It's a cliche to say it's a marathon, not a sprint, but I think the personal marathon that you go through to reimagine yourself in bigger and bigger spheres and inhabiting sort of a more and more actualized version of what you can bring to the table, that has been, I think, the key to everything, and also it's the hardest part.
Thank you guys so much. Deb, Liz, Sarah, let's give them a big round of applause. You guys are awesome. Thank you for joining us.